Recognizing Palestine signals the end. Fishy Rishi goes to the polls. Labor goes chips up and more. The Monica Perez Show starts now. Don't forget, the show is live Tuesdays and Thursdays at 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern on your favorite video streaming platform, especially rockfin.com/Monica Perez. And on YouTube, we chat a lot, and I'll read the comments at the bottom of the hour. And if you miss it live, you can get it right after that's over, about an hour later, on your favorite podcasting platform. And you know what I would love? You can sign up for premium on iTunes if you want. But I would love it if you'd give me a review, a rating. You don't even have to write anything. Just give me some stars wherever you listen to this show. Thank you so much. Okay, the first story is Norway, Ireland, and Spain say they will recognize a Palestinian state, deepening Israel's isolation. So there's your little editorial comment right there in the headline. For me, another headline is Gaza war boosts Palestinian statehood backing. So that to me is more telling, to say that what's happening in Gaza now is promoting the two-state solution. And the next line, a little subheading there on that one, that's a CBS News story. Says Israel's relentless offensive in Gaza, which has left at least 35,647 people dead, according to the Hamas-run territory's health ministry. In retaliation for Hamas's killing of more than 1,170 people in Israel on October 7th, has revived support in Europe for Palestinian statehood. So a couple of things leap out at me there. It is, to me now, like Norway just joined NATO. So Norway's following orders. This is part of the plan. And to me, this shows that it's a fait accompli, that we are definitely going to march into Palestine. They're basically going to ask us. Israel's against it, right? That's a lot of press coming out of Israel. They do not want a two-state solution. So Israel's not going to do it. One of the controversies here is that unilaterally recognizing Palestine as a state is not the way the Americans want to go about it. They want any statehood, any solution, whether it's two-state or one state, to be a deal arranged by Palestine and Israel, which is ridiculous. I mean, that's never happening. It's never happened. It's never going to happen. And I think this is all, it's a predetermined outcome. I've told you about it before. I also, and for us, so we'll march in. We'll be the only ones. We're the world's peacemakers. We're the world's police. We have American exceptionalism. We can violate sovereignty or determine it or whatever. We do nation building. So I assume we'll go in there. What's happening is Israel's leveling it, both getting rid of the people, clearing out the people from wherever they want, clearing out buildings they probably don't want there. I don't know how many Palestinians have left in the past year or 6 months, whatever. There are more Palestinians out, more Palestinian refugees than there are Palestinians who live in Gaza and the West Bank. I think it's probably at least 2-1, if not 3-1. I think there are 6 million Palestinian refugees outside of the country. I don't know if they've been able to really exit during this thing. I don't know if they were killed or leaving or what. I mean, I know that 35,000 were killed, but are they in? So they were all corralled into Rafah, and an attack on Rafah like they say it's underway, but then it's not underway. I don't know. But I'm wondering, is this a cauldron? Are they just dropping bombs on all the people they made go there in the first place, or did they let them out? I don't know how it's working, but I feel like Israel, one way or another, is clearing it. Then we'll go in, we'll run it. We will have nation building. It will be like an occupied country, like Japan, Germany after World War II. I mean, that's just what I think is meant to happen. And I also feel like you can give a lot of lip service to an underdog, to an environmental teacher at law school who used to say charismatic megafauna is way better for policy. So if you have like a endangered bison, it's better than like a microbe if you want. And I feel like that with Down syndrome, like people could never, while Down syndrome, before the sonograms. So it used to be you had to get an amnio, which would endanger the baby. If you were So a lot of people didn't get the amnio and they'd end up having a child who had Down syndrome. But after I had my son, but before I had my next kids, there's a sonogram at 12 or 13 weeks that can determine pretty accurately whether or not your child has Down syndrome. And then the abortion rate is like almost, it's like in the 95th percent or something like that, very high. And now that Down syndrome is effectively eradicated in that way, now you see kids who have Down syndrome in their models, you see them in an ad, you see them in movies. They're all cute and cuddly, and now it's okay to love them because there is absolutely no chance they're making a comeback anytime soon. And that's part of what I feel about what's happening with Palestine. It's okay for all these countries to come out saying they were on the right side of this after it's too late. It's a fait accompli. So, uh, and not to mention, 143 states have already recognized Palestine. It is the norm by far in the world to recognize the state of Palestine. And now, even France and Australia are saying that they're open to the possibility of recognizing Palestine. So, Palestine had made a move, asked to be in the UN, I think in 2011, maybe didn't make it, but did get accepted to UNESCO, which is getting news these days for being pro Hamas or whatever. But I just think that it just means they're all kind of CIA. you know, it's not, the faction is not happening at that level. I do wonder about like Trump. For a while, he said two-state solution, and now he's saying that seems impossible. And he's getting wide praise. I was reading the Jewish News Syndicate out of Israel saying, like, thank goodness he's come to his senses. I hope he like whatever it provides courage for other people to come out and be against the two-state solution. And that news article, Jewish News Syndicate, was very against the two-state solution. But I can't tell if they're doing that just to pander to whatever internal Israeli politics, if there really are two factions in the world. Like I know when Giuliani went over to Ukraine to see if he could tap into that stream of corruption, he was slapped down and slapped down hard. Like there definitely seemed to be like a B team of self-interested, corrupt, pseudo statesmen out there. I don't know if this is that. Like, I don't know, because obviously Netanyahu and Trump are like a bedfellows. Jared Kushner literally gave up his bed as a kid to Netanyahu when he was visiting this country, which is just mind blowing to me. And whatever, don't get into all that deep story. But obviously, Trump and Netanyahu are allies. And I don't know how popular Netanyahu is. He kept losing the election, yet still retains power. I don't know if he's going to be a scapegoat or what, but this is one area where I think there may be some resistance to what I'm going to call the Blinken plan. Blinken said he wanted two states; he's getting two states. But the first actually, so the UN does fly the Palestinian flag. They call it I think they call it something like an non-member observer state. Yes, that is correct. Sweden in 2014 was the first country to recognize Palestine, Western country, because it has a lot of Palestinians in it, which is funny. Like the whole immigration thing is really obvious when you look at Sweden's immigration problems, because here we say like they're not securing the border. People are just coming over. Chinese people are coming over because the Mexican border is so porous. Like we don't know what we're doing. Like we're doing a terrible job. And if it weren't for this pesky border, if we could just build a wall, but Sweden doesn't need a wall between itself and Palestine or Iraq or Somalia or all the places where they get their immigrants. It's government policy, obviously. And that brings me to the next topic, which is the Prime Minister of the UK, Rishi Sunak, just called an election. He was required to call one by January 2025. You get five years between elections. And so because he's trailing so badly in the polls to the Labor guy, Keir Starmer, 21%, I think, people thought he might try to kick the can as close to January as possible, but he's going now. Some people try to excuse his ballsy. It looks suicidal, but he probably, like, accomplished what he needed to accomplish, which in my mind is directing UK policy towards his father-in-law. I'll tell you a little bit about that in a second. But one of the biggest, the number one issue cited for his unpopularity is the surge of immigration since he took office. So this is a guy on the right, supposedly. I mean, it's whatever to the extent there's a right in England, but he is a uh, conservative, and Starmer is a liberal, like in their senses of the term, Labor Party, Tory, whatever. And it's funny because Starmer took the reins of the Labor Party after Jeremy Corbyn kind of crashed and burned, and he seemed pretty base in some ways, like, he seemed legit, but then he went under, and Starmer came in and moved the Labor Party to the right in a lot of ways, or that's at least what the reporting is. That he's promising to control the immigration thing. He's continuing to support the war in Ukraine. He's promising to do that. He wants to be more business friendly. And of course, like the classic wedge issue over there is like the health system isn't working right. The national health system is doing poorly. They'll never fix that system because it is such an effective wedge issue. Like we have, but the Supreme Court, like they'll always have, but the healthcare. So they all run on that one way or another. But it's funny because William from England of the History Homos was saying, he was talking with Scott and Anthony Raimondo, friend of the show, about how William was saying over there, the labor guy is going to give you stuff a conservative guy could never get away with. Like I'll say it will take a Republican to give you gun control. Um, It'll take a Democrat to give you endless war, openly endless war. And they were talking about it at length. So it obviously happens there the way it happens here. But I had noticed that here many years ago. And in my glossary at monicaperezshow.com, I don't even know if it's, I have problems with the site. So should still be up there. But I have this little coin, terms like coin, such as the contrary law of democracy, where you're only going to get what you fear the most from your side, because the other side, your entire side would rise up against them. They chill. Like one of the examples that I've cited and they cited on their show recently was that Obama chilled the anti-war left. I mean, that was the end of it. So that's the contrary law of democracy, and that is probably what what is going to continue to march on. But I just thought it was funny that Sunak was being lost popularity because of the immigration surge, which of course, again, the fact that these things are problems everywhere and all the Western countries, they're a policy decision. They're not just this weird series of incompetence, like serial incompetence in every country with every party. It's not. This is what they want. And it seems to me this, what they call an extinction burst in some psych stuff, that they want just massive, they want the immigration now. They want to just push it as much as possible now. And then they're going to respond to calls to end it. They're going to end it. They're slowing down air travel, whatever. It's one of those scenarios from that 2010 thing from the Rockefeller Foundation, not the pandemic one, or maybe it is the pandemic one, but where countries and regions isolate themselves. There isn't a lot of sharing. And I think that's what the powers that be have determined is probably the best way to keep us down, and certainly to keep us from communicating with real other people on the ground. So I feel like the immigration thing is kind of in a death throw. Like this is an immigration burst, an extinction burst. But yeah, I almost want, I wonder if Jeremy Corbyn, by blowing up, opened the door for this Starmer to like move labor to the center. And I always thought that about Trump too. Like he was there to teach people a lesson. Be careful what you ask for if you want the not real politician. But his situation just continues to amaze me that he's going to come back for another round. I mean, people think he's going to win. I just can't believe it. I just can't believe it as a person. I mean, I think this guy, he's not a drinker, but he likes the finer things in life. I cannot imagine he's going to want to do this for another 4 years. But boy, if he comes in for another 4 years, I can only imagine what would be up his sleeve. I would say past past performance is no indication of future results. I just have no idea what they are going to use that for, and I worry about it. But anybody who gets elected, I'm worried about. They all scare me. So, what the only thing I cannot see how Rishi Sunak could win. And by the way, I don't know if you heard, I did like 3 deep dives on him because his gaining the reins of power in the UK as prime minister was the most under democratic process I have ever seen in a Western country. I mean, just unbelievable. Like, I mean, they absolutely installed him, took no chances. There was no scenario under which he could even pretend to run and win. And there he is. I figured from the beginning it was about moving UK policy towards more surveillance. He's still making speeches about the importance of the security state. I think he just called it the like auxiliary axis of authoritarian states. Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, because, but I, of course, think cynically that it's because his father-in-law, the source of all of his wealth, is has a company called Infosys. That's a company that does a lot of this, the software and systems for the surveillance state for processing this big data. And there was an article, a really funny article, talk about, a leading headline. Infosys enjoyed a boom in UK government invoices in 2023, linked to the prime minister's wife. Linked, her father founded it and owns, I think he's the largest shareholder still. The Indian firm achieves a contract wins an open and fair process. So nothing to see here. They had a 49% increase in invoices from the UK government for 2023. However, that followed a decline the previous year. So, but I don't even care about those invoices while Sunak was in position. It's the policies that lead to a much like an expansion of market share for Infosys, where they're one of the only companies that can provide the scale of support for the surveillance state. So I assume that Sunak set it up. He's ready to go. He doesn't need to be there anymore. He did his job, and that's that. But if there is any chance for him to actually win, it would be that inflation is coming down. I think it was down from 11% to like 2 or 3%, and that will that would give them an excuse to perhaps lower rates, like in the beginning of June. So if they lower, I think it's June 28th is the election. If they were to lower rates in the beginning of June, it could pop the stock market or their economy or whatever. I mean, but he's trailing 21 points. I just can't see how he wins that. Anyway, there was another little article about the UK in the news yesterday. I think this UK blood scandal. It says that between 1970 and the early 90s, more than 30,000 NHS National Health Service patients were given blood transfusions or treatments which used blood products that were contaminated with hepatitis C or HIV. Over 3,000 people have died as a result, and thousands live with ongoing health conditions. And the news is they're settling it. They're paying these people off, yada, yada. And if you look back, so the reason I'm trying to figure out, because the hepatitis thing and the HIV thing, I actually don't believe are transmissible blood diseases. Maybe some hepatitis is, maybe not. But my understanding of hepatitis is it's really essentially liver failure from mostly self-abuse, like, bad things that you do to your liver. And HIV, similarly, I believe, is a result of bad things that you've done to your body, and they're not viral. Funny thing is, hepatitis gives you a false positive on HIV. And I do believe that's what happened to my brother, who was an IV drug user. He had hepatitis. He tested positive for HIV. They gave him AZT and he died of that, in my opinion. So I don't really believe all this stuff about the contagion of this thing through blood. And I wonder, so like Arthur Ashe supposedly got HIV from a blood transfusion, but I think I'm almost positive they gave him AZT, which anybody I've ever looked up who supposedly died of AIDS, I have found took AZT. Roy Cohn, Freddie Mercury, like they took AZT. So I'm trying to determine if people who have hemophilia are already prone to liver disease. If they're already prone to hepatitis, then you would think that people who are getting transfusions who have hepatitis would have liver disease. Now, they do have a higher rate of liver disease. It may be because they always get blood transfusions, and that's what this is all about. Certainly before they learned how to filter the blood or something that's supposedly whatever, viralize the blood. I don't know, but those kind of stories, I would just, how did they prove that these people had that illness because of these tainted blood? I would want to see the rates of this disease, this illness in that group versus another group. And I could not find the study. So I'm skeptical about that. Okay. Here's another little health thing. Here's a question. An article posed, can mental health conditions spread among teenage classmates? It says the latest research, this is from, I just got it off the press rundown. I get an email from just like that tells me the top stories and stuff I want to pick. Sometimes it's like more obscure stories like this. Anyway, it says the latest research suggests that having just one person in a school class with a mental health condition may increase the risk of such a diagnosis among their peers. This finding raises questions about the potential transmission of mental health conditions among teenagers. Now, I was thinking, I remember hearing that grief counseling can prolong grief. And I tried to find that article, and I'll tell you what happened when I did. But it made me take a step back when I read the next line in this article, which says, that having one person with a mental health issue in a high school class can spread it to other people. And the very next sentence, it says, without any supporting evidence, it is crucial for individuals with mental health conditions to have open and supportive conversations with those close to them. It can help create a more understanding and empathetic environment within schools, reducing the stigma associated with mental health issues. They are encouraging these kids to communicate with their peers about their mental health issue in the same breath as they are saying that it spreads. And I think it's totally irresponsible to say stuff like that unless you have evidence to back it up. I find that about parenting, about psych stuff across the board. So little of it is really supported by good evidence. And I know they can't do, for the most part, human trials, but even some nod towards evidence, some, giving you any supporting evidence that you can evaluate on yourself. These things, I'm telling you, I think 9 out of 10 times the author just writes that, or that's just, it's just an assessment made by some organization, an association with no members, which is such a weird concept. So I was trying to find how I definitely think depression and maybe anxiety are contagious like that. That I was trying to find the studies that said about how this grief counseling can really backfire. And honestly, I think some of the grief counseling that backfired was associated with what I consider to be false flag events. So, well, you know what they are. One was in Connecticut, one was in Boston, one was in New York, not in that order. And funny, so I could hardly find it anywhere. And then I did stumble upon an article that referred to those studies. They were behind paywalls. It was the New York Times revealed it, but they did actually cite 9/11, I think. This thing called the Competitive Enterprise Institute. It's I guess a libertarian think tank, but talks about policies, it says the Competitive Enterprise Institute is a nonprofit public policy organization dedicated to advancing the principles of limited government, free enterprise, and individual liberty. Our mission is to promote both freedom and fairness by making good policy good politics. We make the uncompromising case for economic freedom because we believe it is essential for entrepreneurship, innovation, and prosperity to flourish. I agree with all that stuff. A lot of times these things are funded by specific big businesses that are after their own industry being favored, or I don't know what. So these things sometimes aren't perfect, but sometimes they give you good information. And in this case, the article addressed what I was talking about. It says, after school shootings, psychologists fan out and provide, quote, grief counseling to student bodies, but it's far from clear that this does any good. Critics say it just encourages students to wallow in despair rather than putting the episode behind them. I absolutely agree with that. Forces students to relive the tragedy. Yes, I agree. Nevertheless, local governments persist in spending money on such activities. I actually wonder if they do that stuff because they know it makes things worse. Now, or that the recommendations are such in full knowledge. It says now even psychologists are admitting, such as in the New York Times, that similar grief counseling to New Yorkers after 9/11 backfired and harmed people. Researchers later discovered that the standard approach at the time, in which the therapist urges a distressed person to talk through the experience and emotions, backfires for many people. They plunge even deeper into anxiety and depression when forced to relive the mayhem. So I just feel like you got to take with a grain of salt the psychological recommendations that are given. And I would say not only are they sloppy and misguided a lot of times, I think they're sinister and nefarious. I think they give us wrong advice on purpose. They know full well that it's contagious, and they tell you, oh, a big thing was Mr. A sent me this once when he was in school. I think he was a psychology major, that the rate of suicide used to be something that was absolutely not spoken about. It was never reported on for this very reason. I'm talking like 100 years ago. Then they started reporting on it, and the rates of suicide seems to be like that was an absolute pivot point when that media policy changed. It went. Then the people started talking about it, so it would be nice if the press had a gentleman's agreement or gentleman's position that they would not report on that stuff. But it'll never be like that. There may be laws against it, but they'll never just hold back. And there was something in the news today which reminded me of the Slovakian president's assassination attempt. They're talking about in Washington now, they keep talking about how they have to protect politicians, that politicians are in danger, and we need to address this, and we need to put people on the spot. It was the Slovakian assassination attempt where that guy was championing so laws to suppress the media, or some policies that would capture the media by government, because unfettered reporting can be dangerous for politicians. But of course, the free press, as a pillar, as the basis of a democratic republic such as ours, I predict that that's going to come here, that's what this is all about. They're playing the very long game, but the real answer is, and I don't want to predict anything bad happening to our politicians, because that would be terrible if they can do so much with those mass traumas. But that ultimately the danger to politicians is going to result in very serious curtailment, the last straw in curtailing our free speech, where it actually addresses political speech. So I feel like that the danger that the press poses in these ways is going to be used against us. And if they would just if we just had a better culture, our old elements of our older culture, where people had self-respect in this way, wouldn't do stuff like that. It was ungentlemanly. It was not respected. Anyway, but I don't think it's happening. All right, let's let's hit some comments. If we've got any. Okay. Oh, thank you. Nightmare Man number 1 says, I look lovely. Thank you so much. Let me see if I can figure this out from Kelvin. A daily reminder. In the end, it will all be okay. If it's not all okay, it's not the end. I think that's like a little bit of a riddle. Calvin says, Gaza is already empty. Let the build back better begin. It was emptied many months. It's a tiny strip of land. Yes, it is a tiny strip of land. And I'll tell you, I don't really do the deep dives that I used to. I'm just trying to keep up with the news. So maybe I should. But this topic too, like, depresses me, and it's so polarizing. And the protesters, the pro-Palestinian protesters, have tainted the subject so thoroughly. I find it totally depressing. But I do know a Palestinian Christian who's been in exile for many years here in California. I may have to get the scoop from him. My grandmother was a Syrian Christian who was raised by Irish nuns. I'm sure I've told you about that. Hey, guys. Yes, Halliburton will definitely be a part of the Build Back Better. Clint Little, war fighting. It's a money-making process for political folks and the rich. They hate us and love power and control. Yes, and they must really, really, truly believe in their own elitism, because they're totally fine murdering people en masse, and they don't even need like the rule of law. So they must have no love for or fear for their descendants. I think they must believe that they and their descendants will always be in the elite, or they don't care about their descendants. It's very weird. Nightmare Man 1, Gaza is just the beginning. Israel wants all the land from the Nile to the Mediterranean. Only problem is there's like tens of millions of Arabs there. Palestine today, tomorrow the world. I did think when they were saying from the river to the sea, or whatever the thing supposedly is that the Palestine say, I thought that's what the Israeli flag was. I thought that's what the Eretz Israel was. Calvin says ultrasound is effectively microwaving the fetus, causes many, many problems. Is that true? Yikes. Well, those days are over for me, but that's good to know. I just thought the ultrasound was no big deal, but how could it not be a big deal? Mother in heaven, help us all. Netanyahu is an American. He went to school in Philly. Is that true? I didn't know that. So Calvin is saying nobody is coming over the border. It is fear bait and scripted and nothing but photo ops. Yeah. Dude, everything's fake. I mean, everything's fake. Everything is fake. So, but every once in a while, like they could haystack something real into all the fake stuff. So I don't know. You think, Calvin, you think that there isn't an extinction burst? There isn't a lot of immigration? I was a little skeptical of it until that Venezuelan guy killed Laken Riley, and that was not fake. Now, it was predictable and part of the plan, but it seems like it is a real problem. All right, my glossary page does not work. Ever since WordPress took me down in August 2018, I have no excuse 6 years later. Calvin says Starmer was covering for a lot of pedophile gangs. He's quite the harmer. Yes, he was a prosecutor, so I guess the power that they have. And if you look into the pedo stuff, I guess Margaret Thatcher was the one who suppressed all those dossiers. I mean, that is a real story. Look into the dossiers of the pedos in the highest ranks. Yikes. Trump will give carte blanche to clear Gaza. Yeah, maybe. I mean, that's what he's saying. I guess Adam Green covers that. Kelvin says Hep C and HIV don't survive outside the physical body. Yeah, I mean, I don't even think they're I mean, what's a virus anyway? That's what they're saying, it's viral. I don't believe that. Right, some of the stuff I am missing. Calvin says suicide figures are artificially fake to push more pills and more fake cures. It's rare. I have a niece, my cousin's son, and a very good friend of our family would support those statistics, the statistics of suicide. I'm sorry to say. So I have to say that that has not been fake in my family. And we had the drug deaths. My sister died of fentanyl. So keeping people dumbed down, scared, and sick is working perfectly as planned. Renee King says, avoid psychoanalysis. They do not buy their own stuff and are committing suicide in record numbers. Really? Is that true? Yes, the pro-Palestinian protesters are tainted by design. I call that phenomenon, Alex Jones being the original, taint agents. They taint issues. Let's hit that like button, guys. Please do. They do not want us unalive. They need us to power this insane reality. I don't know, man. Like it is insane, but I will tell you, so when I stopped doing the drive time news blast, so I was doing the propaganda report 6 days a week. So it was way too much. And I have kids at home. Like I feel a little embarrassed that I did it for so long. But maybe it was only 2.5 years actually. So I couldn't think, like I was just constantly reading the news and I couldn't think more deeply. I was like, what is the true power nature of power in earth and in the universe? What's the real answer? And actually having taken 2 years off, I have concluded that the true nature of power on earth is earthly and satanic. The true nature of power in the universe is probably God, and I'm going with a personal God. My God is Catholic. And as my mother says, it's just a better way to live. It gives you focus, it gives you comfort. And I also realize that we really must not let it really get to us, because a big part of this, the propaganda machine, is to have it get to us. That's why they feed the conspiracies and everything. It has it get to us. I do this show because I think I'm starting to think that we have to get involved. I think we have to actually care about the process and what the process can do for us, because by being like an anarcho-capitalist, theoretically it's true and I think it would work. However, we have this process now, and if we let this process go, we're not going to have an anarcho-capitalist utopia. We're going to have a world government. We need to keep our feet on the ground here. We need to kick that can to hang on to what little we have. And so I'm trying to get Anthony Raimondo to come on, because he got me to really commit to that. Like last time we talked, he's like, yeah, we've got to get our hands dirty with the real issues and the policies and stuff. I guess. I don't know. I'm going to explore it with him. I hate politics. I hate going to the grocery store. I don't want to go to a city council meeting. So I hope it really doesn't come to that. But anyway, speaking of going to the store, so I noticed that Target said that their sales were down. They are losing market share. So that is not necessarily a testament to the changing economy, because Costco, Amazon, and Walmart are, I think, gaining market share from Target, which is a shame because I really like Target. They also say a lot more spending is going from goods to services. And I was like, what do they mean by that? And what they mean, when I found like what are services, housing, utilities, insurance. I mean, housing? How's housing a service? Rent? I don't know. Healthcare, food, accommodations, recreation, transportation. So that makes sense. I thought they were maybe saying like Netflix, which I'm sure is included, but I didn't know if that was really we were just getting all digital, getting into our little screen box and staying there and not eating or like rocking back and forth with our like iPads, like so many 2-year-olds you see these days. So Target has got problems. That wasn't totally like a sign of the times, but I did also see Rite Aid had I think filed Chapter 11 in maybe October based on the opioid thing. That was something interesting. It says that Rite Aid filed Chapter 11 to protect against opioid lawsuits and legal battles. Now, the FDA regulates this stuff. I've always said the FDA gives you a false sense of security. The Food and Drug Administration gives you a false sense of security that we'd be much better off being on our toes, being skeptical about these drugs. And when you buy them at CVS, if they make assurances to you that it's safe, you can rely on them. And if it's not, then we have tort law. If you have rock solid tort law where you sue these places out of existence, that's why I never mind like super huge judgments if they're deserved. If you drive them out of business, nail that squirrel to a tree for all the other squirrels to know, if you cross this line, you are dead. And that is really the American way, because we are not a country of a priori restraint. We're not supposed to tell people they can't do things or can't say things. But if you say or do something that causes real damage, the person or entity that you've damaged gets to not only get compensated for that, but gets overcompensated with punitive damages, which you have to pay for, which punitive punishes you, but rewards them for going through the awful, brutal beating of a lawsuit, which sucks. So these guys are still getting sued, even though, and this is another problem with the FDA stuff, that if you follow the rules they set out, it should be it works effectively, generally speaking, as a liability shield. So even with the like the medical malpractice, if the only way you can get money off a doctor for medical malpractice is if he did not follow generally accepted practices or whatever, AMA recommendations or whatever. So if you're doing what you're told, you should not get sued. But I don't think that you should be told. I don't think it should be like that. I am a believer in the tort. So anyway, but Rite Aid, CVS, other pharmacies are closing their locations because of online stuff. So we're really moving, obviously. I mean, this is no news, but eventually, kind of like having a 24-hour pharmacy around where I can go if it's an emergency when you're sick. But they'll probably have drones for that. And there are many benefits to that, but I just do not like that we're really shutting down, really getting isolated, really becoming just empty consumer maws, like out of a future sci-fi. And then I thought and then there's layoffs at Pixar. I think they're laying off 14% of their workforce. They're going towards more full-length movies than live streaming TV shows, I guess. I don't know. I don't really follow that stuff. I don't care, but I just noticed the juxtaposition of like retail establishments closing, sales down, layoffs happening. And then, but what was the counterpoise in the stock market yesterday? NVIDIA. NVIDIA is the AI chip, not manufacturer, actually. I mean, they do some stuff, but the chips that they're riding high on are manufactured by the Taiwan Semiconductor Company. And NVIDIA was founded by a Taiwanese American in San Jose. So I did actually a couple of deep dives on that too, on the CHIPS Act. I'll put them in the show notes, as well as the Rishi Sunak thing. Maybe I'll find a link to the glossary that isn't 404'd. But they, so I think, let me just tell you how much NVIDIA made. The quarterly sales were $28 billion, quarterly sales. So they are riding high. And, I just couldn't help but notice that we're getting digitized. We are for sure getting digitized. That's not news to anybody. But it annoys me because our tax dollars have subsidized this kind of scientific research for so long. It would absolutely never have happened in the private market because you don't need to. It's not worth it. It's not worth the marginal investment. And do we need it as a society? It's like a world good we have to have technology. No, it's terrible. It's terrible for us. We're much better off. And then it's going to kick off the reactionaries off the grid into the outlands and neutralize us politically. So let's see what I'm looking forward to my conversation with Anthony. Okay. I already went over and we didn't even get to our clip yet. And I don't even think I finished all my stories. So, but let's just get to that clip. And I saw this movie the other day, this documentary, hats tip to Bobby again, called Mirage Men. And it's about the UFO phenomenon and the government's role in promoting the UFO mythology. Now, you can watch the documentary. It doesn't come out and say, I actually think they come out and say they believe that UFOs do exist, but that the government involves itself for various reasons in promoting the mythology. Well, at the same time, so I want to play you a clip from that documentary. And I also want to tell you that so many people have been telling me that they're at a UFO conference or Anthony is in Roswell right now. And I happen to notice that not far from my stomping grounds here in California, Contact in the Desert is in Indian Wells next weekend. It's a UFO and UAP, unidentified anomalous phenomenon, conference, and it is a beacon. This is what they say. It's a beacon of intellectual discourse dedicated to exploring the frontiers of knowledge in UAP, artificial intelligence, the future of technology and space travel, non-human intelligence, spirituality, and health and wellness. I actually might go there. It's so close to me that I might actually pop over there. It's May 30th to June 3rd, and I'll put that in the show notes. It's contactinthedesert.com. So in the meanwhile, I do not actually believe in UFOs, but it's kind of like the MAGA thing. Like, I'm not a Trump supporter, but I love the crowd. I love the people. So I think I would have a good time there, even if I'm not smoking the Kool-Aid. All right, so let's hit this. Let's hit it, and I will leave you with that. Thank you all for coming. This is Monica Perez.
Now, Doty played a massive role in the perpetuation of the Roswell myth, many of the ideas prominent in the UFO subculture for 2 decades, and it was completely avoided. Rick Doty is certainly a fascinating character and clearly a trickster.
A man who probably has trouble figuring out whether he's lying or not these days.
It would not surprise me if people were selected to sow disinformation. It would also not surprise me if some of the people were selected because they were not very bright. They lacked certain critical judgment, but were very energetic in putting out certain messages. And I do often think that some of the people in the government agencies who have been involved in the UFO field were kind of pushed or nudged in that direction. They just go into the field and muck it up automatically by themselves without any external control.
At the core, there is something that they want to keep people away from, a real truth.
Back in the early 80s, it was my job to confuse the UFO community. And it was very easy to convince Paul. Paul was a World War II veteran. He's very patriotic. He always flew his flag. Those type of people you can convince that, listen, you can't tell anybody else about this because this, you could get in the wrong hands.
Would we use perception to help shroud what we're trying to protect? Absolutely. If you've got an aerial platform that is highly advanced and the public who happens to get a glimpse of the thing, if they're convinced that it's from Venus and there's no way it could be our military, well, hey, that's awesome. Hell yes.
It's been a cover story in the U.S. for a long time. Tell the media, tell anybody who will listen, that they're using UFOs to cover up advanced technology, when The truth is exactly the opposite of the words.
We're really a byproduct of extraterrestrial intervention.
What if we're their farm animals? What if they eat us psychically? I don't know. There's a lot of possibilities here that are not good.
Doty had this wonderful way to sell it. I'm with the government. You cooperate with us, and I'm going to tell you what the government really knows about UFOs deep down in those vaults. I'm going to tell you all kinds of lies.
Whatever's going on, it's happening at a government level. Everything that I do is being watched. And I have to assume that I'm being bugged.
Let's take one step at a time. You're looking at Richard Doty, the professional disinformer, trained to lie.